Good morning, everyone. My name is Erica Holzer, and I'm a partner at the Maslon Law Firm. And on behalf of all of my colleagues at Maslon, I would like to welcome you to this program, celebrating and honoring the career and lifetime achievements of my friend and mentor, David Herr. As many of you know, David was diagnosed earlier this year with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And David is one of the greats, like Lou Gehrig. In his famous speech in front of millions of people, Lou Gehrig said, "Fans, for the past 2 weeks, you have been reading about the bad break I got. Yet today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of this earth." I think it's safe to say that we're all gathered here today as fans of David Herr. And although we can't be together in person, I do imagine us all sort of sitting in the stands of a ballpark, circling David with an old-timey microphone with the echo in the stands, or maybe more realistically in a fancy ballroom in a hotel in downtown Minneapolis. But I do imagine us all together today and sharing this moment to honor this great man. And David and Mary Kay, who are both here with us today, I hope that you feel the care and the love from all of us surrounding you today. When I spoke to David a few weeks ago, he told me that he shared the sentiments of Lou Gehrig, that he had lived a good life, that he had accomplished everything he wanted, that he had traveled the world, raised 2 incredible sons, was a devoted and gentle husband in a marriage that was filled with love, and lived life to the fullest. May we all be so lucky in the final chapter of our lives to be able to say that. The program today will run about an hour. We will hear remarks from several people, including Mary Kay, David's wife, who will share her remarks at the end of the hour. And the first person I have the great honor of introducing is the governor of the state of Minnesota, Tim Walz.
Hello, everyone. Governor Walz here. I'm pleased to be able to participate in this important event honoring David Herr, who all of you know is a giant in the legal profession and someone who has worked tirelessly over an entire career to advance the rule of law and the institutions that support it. David's lifetime of service is ensuring that our justice system is administered fairly for all Minnesotans is a legacy that will be felt for generations to come. David's endless contributions, whether it's extensive service to the Minnesota judicial branch or the numerous organizations that have benefited from your wisdom and efforts over the course of your career, we're all better off because of the work you've done. When I reflect upon the many great legal luminaries that have practiced in our great state, there are very few that have had the impact that David's had. You're a visionary in every sense of the word. You have dedicated your life to serving clients, teaching students and attorneys, and improving our judicial system. It's hard to imagine anyone more deserving of the recognition than what you're receiving today, David. On behalf of the people of Minnesota, we extend our sincere gratitude to you today for a lifetime of service. I wish you, Mary Kay, Erlen, and Alec all of the best.
I want to thank Governor Walz for taking the time to give those remarks, and I want to thank everybody at the state of Minnesota who helped us make that happen. The second person who wanted to be here today, but who couldn't, is St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter. As many of you know, David has been a lifelong resident of St. Paul, and I have the pleasure of telling you that Melvin Carter has declared today, December 3rd, 2021, as David F. Herr Day in the city of St. Paul. And since Mayor Carter can't be here, he did ask me to read this proclamation, this very official proclamation, on his behalf. So if you will indulge me, I will do that now. Whereas David F. Herr of Maslon LLP is one of the most highly regarded appellate lawyers and complex case litigators in Minnesota, few people have had a greater impact on Minnesota law and Minnesota lawyers. Whereas David has dedicated his life to helping advance the legal profession and improve the judicial system in Minnesota, including mentoring hundreds of lawyers and authoring more than 15 treatises on Minnesota and federal law. Whereas David has helped draft and amend the rules that guide and govern Minnesota lawyers and judges in every facet of civil practice through his decades of work as a reporter for the Minnesota Supreme Court advisory committees. And whereas David was integral in founding the Minnesota Supreme Court Historical Society, an organization dedicated to collecting, preserving, and promoting Minnesota's judicial history, and served on its board for many years. Whereas David has demonstrated an enduring commitment to justice and community service through his extensive pro bono and volunteer work, including his service as chair and board member of the Innocence Project of Minnesota, president of the American Academy of Appellate Lawyers, and chair of the United Hospital Foundation. And whereas David Herr has been a lifelong resident of his beloved city of St. Paul and has made a profound impact on many St. Paul institutions, including his alma mater, William Mitchell College of Law. Now, therefore, I, Melvin Carter, Mayor of the City of St. Paul, do hereby proclaim Friday, December 3rd, 2021 to be David F. Herr Day in the City of St. Paul. I want to thank Mayor Carter and everybody in his office also for dedicating today to David. I will now introduce Justice G. Barry Anderson of the Minnesota Supreme Court.
Thank you, Erica, and thank you to everyone who's helped organize this important event. On behalf of the Minnesota Supreme Court, it's my privilege to participate in this retrospective look at one of Minnesota's legal giants, David Herr, and his enormous contributions to the practice of law and to the people of the state of Minnesota. Now, there are many ways in which David's career intersects with the Supreme Court, not only its current members, but going back decades to past members, some of whom are no longer with us. But I'm going to visit with you this morning about three ways in which his career has intersected with the court. First, a discussion of his commitment to our various rules committees and some of the work that he's done there. Second, we're going to visit a little bit about his work with the Supreme Court Historical Society. And finally, some continuing legal education aspects that are particularly relevant to the rules discussion, which we're now going to move to. For many years, David has been a reporter, the reporter for various rules committees and a member of other rules committees. And when I was asked to participate in this program today, I asked our terrific staff here to round up all of the committees that we could find where David was a participant. Here is the list that we came up with. It's almost certainly incomplete. We only get back to somewhere in the mid-1980s. And there are probably committees that we've missed where David was a reporter or a member, but it includes, I'm going to talk about this first one a little bit later, the Uniform Local Rules Task Force reporter, beginning in October of 1989 and continuing through the adoption of the rules, April of 1991. The General Rules of Practice for the District Courts, he was a reporter for that committee from July 1982 to the present, successor to the previous committee that I just mentioned. The Rules of Civil Procedure, reporter from 1984 to the present. The Rules of Civil Appellate Procedure, co-reporter from April 1997 to the present. And the Civil Justice Reform Task Force member from November of 2010 through May of 2012. And finally, who knows how many other committees and other ways in which he has served. One of the things I thought we could do today is maybe give all of our viewers a little taste of what it's like to have a presentation from David Herr, sitting from our side of the bench, looking out and seeing the reporter give his remarks. So the highly efficient staff at Maslon is prepared to run that tape, and here we go.
And so now I'll turn to David and ask for his remarks.
So the red light's on, but I recognize that I took a lot of your time with my questions. So Mr. Herr, please come forward and tell us what you need to tell us.
I was going to say in my remaining time, Your Honors, I've had the privilege of serving as reporter for this committee for back to its inception as part of the General Uniform Rules of Practice Committee. The answer to some of your questions
about the deletion of the catch-all provision. And my question is,
In light of the provision in 1.02, and this is the reason I'm picking on you because you go back a ways with these general rules of practice. But in light of the language, I think it's in Rule 1.02 that talks about the district court can ignore rules if there's manifest injustice or words to that effect.
Modify was
Modify, thank you.
we don't have courts ignoring rules.
That's right. All right, good point. Stand corrected. But so in light of that language, I mean, what is the significance of the deletion of the catch-all except to hide that principle from somebody who looks at the rule and says, well, how do I raise this issue that I have with how my matter was handled by a tribal court?
Because the collective wisdom of the committee thought that it was surplusage and unnecessarily complicated the rule.
Okay.
And we did hear from that. It came in the petition, and the committee was ultimately persuaded that that was a legitimate concern and that Rule 1.02 did provide enough of a safety valve. I mean, I think that, there's always a concern if you're going to amend a rule and take away the right of a district court judge to do justice. There's a reason for concern, but I don't think that it's likely that that would be the interpretation given the rule.
Okay, thank you. Notice two things about that little clip of our friend and colleague David Herr reporting to the Minnesota Supreme Court. First thing you should notice is the polite and charitable way he corrects the distinguished jurist who managed to mangle his question. That's important, but the more important and significant thing about that clip is notice what reporter David Herr says and how he says it. He's not talking about what the chair of the committee thinks. He's not talking about what the liaison justice might think, or even what David Herr might think. He opens his remarks by saying it was the collective wisdom of the committee. He was there as a reporter, as a representative of the committee to report what the committee's discussions were about and why they occurred and what the result of those discussions were. I think that it's sometimes difficult for lawyers to subsume their own identity. But in the reporter's role, he needed to do that, and he does that. And he did that successfully for many, many years. One other comment about his work on behalf of the rules committees, he had an ability to sort of bring levity to some difficult circumstances. Mike Johnson, who worked with a staff lawyer here at the Supreme Court, worked with David for many, many years in many of these committees, reports an incident, and I recall this now that he mentions it, where we were discussing, not all rules are meritorious. Some don't get followed, some get followed in the absence. And one of those rules was being discussed, and David was explaining the policy behind a rule that had not been amended in a long time. And a jurist who was a member of the committee pointed out that the rule appeared to say exactly the opposite in that situation. David's response was, well, only if you read it. So I can't recall if we just deleted the rule or amended it into oblivion, but David's comments, I think, were well taken. He was an important factor in all of those rules committees. Let's move on to the second area of intersection, and that's the Supreme Court Historical Society. I had a little conversation with Sam Hansen, a former member of the court who was chair of the board for the Supreme Court Historical Society, and he reports that in late 2007, when the Supreme Court put together a group of likely suspects to consider whether the court should have a historical society and what it should look like, David was one of the first volunteers. There are a variety of ways that one can volunteer to get an organization started. You could volunteer to be the chair, you could volunteer to be on the board, you can volunteer to run a committee, but the one job you don't want to volunteer for is to be the treasurer. Why don't you want to be the treasurer? Because it's the treasurer that files all the appropriate certificates. It's the treasurer that keeps the nonprofit organization in good standing with the Attorney General, who wants an argument with the Attorney General, and who, of course, volunteers to do that thankless task of being the treasurer with David Herr. David was our first treasurer of the society and got that organization on the sound footing that it is today. It really is fair to regard him as one of the founders of the Supreme Court Historical Society. Just one of the volunteer opportunities that he took that perhaps most people won't remember, but will serve the people of Minnesota Supreme Court, and our lawyers around Minnesota for decades to come. Finally, I should mention his contribution didn't end in 2007. His last effort on behalf of the Supreme Court Historical Society was as a moderator of a continuing legal education panel that included Justices Lilhog, Meyer, and myself about arguing to a policymaking court, something that David would know a great deal about. And that was held at the Maslon offices in September 26 of 2019, about 6 months before all our lives were tipped upside down by the coronavirus. Perhaps one of the last in-person events that the society held, and David was the moderator for that event. And that leads finally to his continuing legal education work on behalf of the court. And here, others will speak at greater length about some of the written work that he does. I'm only going to mention that on those various rules committees that I discussed earlier, he would often call after the court adopted the rule. You get this call from David where he would say, you know, we really should put together an hour-long presentation over lunch for lawyers to join us and ask questions about the new civil procedure rules or whatever it was that we had adopted. And he would have these seminars. Eric and I participated in several of them. Other members of the court also participated with David, that would be held at the Minnesota CLE Center in downtown Minneapolis. Not only were these events significant and important to the lawyers, I will also tell you that one of my fondest memories of these opportunities was also the opportunity to go to lunch with David and whoever else was available afterwards, often at Murray's, where David would famously tell the staff to bring his lunch and his 5 French fries. He's the only guy I know that would go into a restaurant and order 5 French fries. Wanted French fries, but didn't need the full plate. It was part of David's humanity and connection to everyone around him. As I'm thinking about all of his performance on all these ways, the thread that goes through everything that he did was a sense of professionalism. The preamble to the model rules of professional conduct states that in all professional functions, a lawyer should be competent, prompt, and diligent. I think that's a pretty good testimony to who David Herr is. I'm just going to illustrate it in one additional way. And that I want to go back to the very first rules committee I told you about, the Uniform Local Rules Task Force, which was organized by then Chief Justice Peter Popovich in October of 1989. And it had members from around the state that were participating with that task force. One of the members of that task force, an obscure lawyer from Western Minnesota, had sort of a general law practice specializing in some automobile defense and some civil litigation and some other kinds of things and city attorney work. You know, he really probably didn't belong in that committee with all these legal giants from around Minnesota, but nonetheless, he was there. And David Herr, the reporter for that committee, treated him just like he treated everybody else. I had an early introduction as that lawyer to who David Herr is. And if I were going to describe his professionalism, I would illustrate it by that ancient religious principle to treat people as you would expect to be treated. And David certainly did that. And that's maybe the best example of professionalism that any of us are going to find. David has been providential to the legal community and the people of Minnesota. And on behalf of the Minnesota Supreme Court, we express our appreciation and are grateful for his service and the opportunity today to summarize it from the perspective of the Minnesota Supreme Court. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justice Anderson, for those words. I'd like to now introduce Eric Magnuson, former Chief Justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court, partner at Robbins Kaplan, and a longtime friend of David's.
Thank you, Erica. David, I've been given a few minutes today to share with you and the audience my reflections on our nearly 50-year friendship. That's hardly enough time because there's really so much to say. Others have and will talk about your great accomplishments. My remarks are going to be a little bit different. We don't often take the time we should to thank those who have made our lives richer by being part of them. I didn't want to miss that opportunity today. I can't begin to express how much I valued your friendship and your leadership over these many years, starting in law school when we both clerked in the Hennepin County District Court. Our relationship has grown over time to be one of the most cherished that I have. I remember our early careers when our paths crossed in a variety of litigated matters. The world recognizes you as not only a consummate appellate lawyer, a skilled and knowledgeable trial lawyer. They tend to overlook the fact that I did some trial work early in my career, and we had occasion to go head to head on some very interesting cases, dead mink and catastrophic fires, both of you, which you know well, edged me not so gently out of the trial practice and into appeals. But it was more than just a preference for handling appeals. You gave me the most wonderful opportunity of my life to take my preference for appeals and turn it into a passion. When you asked me to help you and Roger Haydock rewrite Hetland and Adamson, which was at that time the Bible of appellate rules in Minnesota. I wouldn't have had that chance but for you. And rewriting that treatise at a time when the appellate courts in Minnesota were being completely redone with the creation of the Court of Appeals was really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It gave both of us the chance to establish credentials as appellate lawyers that it would have taken us decades, I think, to earn otherwise. And it gave me an outlet for my passion to track down minutia to the nth degree. One of the reasons we work so well together is that you always guided me with your wise counsel to pull me back into the real world. I have a tendency to like a microscopic view of things. And you constantly reminded me that our goal was to make the book useful to practitioners, reminding me that not every nuance required a detailed explanation. You really balanced me. Your thoughtfulness showed itself again in our work on the appellate rules. You were in far more committees than I, but we worked together on the appellate rules and had a hand in some significant improvements to the appellate system in Minnesota. You, as always, led the way with your encyclopedic knowledge of both the substance of appellate law and how the rulemaking process worked. It was a pleasure to me to watch you navigate that sometimes difficult path. We taught law school together. And again, that was another wonderful experience. I learned from you almost as much as the students did. Your rapport with them, your curiosity as to what they were thinking, and your skills as a teacher were really inspiring. That carried over to our longstanding series of appellate webcasts. Once again, you taught me the value of relying on our by then vast knowledge of all things appeals. You showed me that too much planning could be a bad thing. It destroyed the spontaneity of the conversation and diminished the value that we gave to the audience. Once again, you counseled, we need to be useful, we need to help those who will appear in front of the courts, and I learned from your example. Our membership in the American Academy of Appellate Lawyers has been another source of joy and pride for me. As you know, this is a group of lawyers who were always the smartest kids in their class. They are leaders in their law firms and legal communities. They are the best of the best. And it's no coincidence that we both served as president because our mutual support in this and all our other endeavors, I think, shone brightly even among these stars. Again, we made each other better. Which brings me to one of my fondest memories of our careers together. I don't know which one of us took more pleasure and satisfaction when a client would hire either you or me on a tough appeal, only to have the other side turn to the one of us not yet in the case and hire him so they could fight what they thought was fire with fire. I know we thought that was about the best thing that could happen to us and the best thing that could happen, frankly, to the clients. We knew we would be in for a tough fight, but one that would be conducted at the highest level. We challenged each other on a regular basis, and I was better for it. But standing side by side, these obvious notable contributions that you've made to my career and to the legal profession as a whole are the contributions that you made to me as a friend. I have always been able to count on you to listen and provide thoughtful and insightful advice on any topic I cared to raise, whether it was career advice or working through a family issue. I've always thought the true measure of friendship is the ability to call someone out of the blue, pick up threads of past conversation as though no time had passed, and talk in depth about the issues that were important at the time. That's how I've always felt about our relationship, and I have taken great comfort in it. You're going to hear a lot of praise today, David, and a lot of thanks. I wanted to end with some really grand words, but you have always taught me that simpler is sometimes better. So I want to conclude, David, by simply saying thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being my good friend.
Thank you so much, Eric. We'll now hear from Cooper Ashley, a former partner at Maslon and another longtime friend of David Herr. Hey, Cooper, you got to go off mute though, sorry.
Thank you for that, Erica. I want to thank my fellow speakers, Justice Anderson, former Chief Justice Magnuson, Dean Janus, and Tim Berg. I want to thank Erica and Jamie Bloomquist at Maslon for putting this all together so seamlessly. And I'd like to thank Mayor Carter and Governor Walz for taking the time. It's not like those guys don't have other things to do. We are all here. Oh, and good morning, David and Mary Kay. I hope you're doing well over in St. Paul. We're all here to congratulate one David Fulton Herr on his amazing legal career. I am honored to be a part of this lifetime achievement celebration. Many of us are well aware of David's many accomplishments. As Governor Walz, Mayor Carter, Justice Anderson, and Chief Justice Magnuson noted, David touches just about everyone and everything in our world called law. Law firms, law students, law schools, fellow lawyers, our state and federal courts at every level, and all of the associated committees, academies, and associations. Who hasn't read at least a part of a David Herr book? Who hasn't cited to a court or opposing counsel a David Herr book? As an aside, David, I love going to court with you because I'd sort of like, hey, judge, you see who I got with me? I got David Herr with me, so I got instant cred. But what was he like around the office? That's what I'd like to talk about a little bit. This all starts with Judge Chester Durda. As far as I can tell, while at Mitchell in the 70s, as Eric alluded to, David was like a gym rat in the Hennepin County Courthouse, always there, always working for a number of judges. And he applied to the then Robbins, Davis, and Lyons firm. And Judge Durda, who, one of those guys, if you appeared in front of him, you know he was old school. He called the recruiting committee at Robbins and said, hire David Herr. Not give him an interview, not give him the best shot you can, hire David Herr. And so they did. That was in 1978. A few years later, David moved to Maslon, and I joined Maslon in 1988 and was assigned to the office next to David in the old Midwest Plaza building. He took me under his wing, and I'm still there. I've had the pleasure of being his partner, colleague, and friend. We have done, as Eric also alluded to, David's a hell of a trial lawyer, and we tried a couple of cases together. We worked on a number of appeals. We were on the Maslon Governance Committee for many years together. David was our general counsel for over 25 years. And his presence in the firm was constant, wonderful, positive. He was a leader and a mentor. Because of all of our work together over the years, we traveled on business and at times with our families to many places all over the place, from London to California to New York to Florida, Chicago, St. Louis, Hawaii, Colorado. So I kind of know him a little bit. And how do I describe him? He is a mentor. He is generous. David, you are kind, you are smart, you are tireless. You love the law, the legal profession, the process, the intellectual challenge. As many of us know, you also love a good steak, a Tanqueray martini up very dry with olives, and a nice bottle of wine. As an aside, again, I would go in these restaurants and all these trips. I never had to plan any of it. He knew where we were going. He knew the best restaurant. He'd make the reservation. And in some places, we liked it so much, we'd buy some of the stuff. This is a tablecloth that we both got a set of these in this little hole in the wall in Chicago. Liked it so much, we talked to Mater D into selling us some of it, and we still use it today. David's a wonderful parent, has been a great husband, and you are wickedly funny, dude. As alluded to, you mentored so many people here at Maslon. You share the spotlight. You don't hog the spotlight. You invited many young lawyers to participate in all of your activities. As Eric Magnuson noted, you invite people to write with you, co-author chapters, co-author articles, speak at CLEs that you might be involved in, work as adjunct professors. All of that paving the way for us to learn how to be lawyers, learn how to be good people. And there was no ego about it, David. It was delightful. One of the things I liked about your office was you wrote all these books, and West would ship them off to wherever they sell them, and they'd send you a box of them. And your office was always littered with these boxes of books. They're still in your office in St. Paul as I speak. And we would come in and talk to you about various things. What do I do about this? What do I do about that? And you'd offer us books, and then you'd wink and say, I could sign it for you. You know, it's important to have an author sign a book. We all got them. Everybody at Maslon had your books on the litigation side, and it was a bond. We had David Herr in the house, so we were ahead of the rest of the litigators. And you were a terrific litigator. You and I tried 2 significant jury trials early in my career at Maslon, and I had tried cases before that, but they had been a grind and hard. We tried the Energy Brain case, which was a fraud and insurance coverage case in Hennepin County. And we tried the Independent School District 622 asbestos case in Stillwater. And we won big on the Energy Brain. We got a great result, and we got absolutely hammered in the 622 case, and to the point they awarded punitive damages against our client. But through both of those trials, you had a joie de vivre. You loved it. You were having a fun time. And you taught me how to respect the other side. We had good lawyers on the other side, how to respect them, how to work with, with the judges, with the bailiff, with everybody. And it was a new concept for me. Jury trials can be fun. And to the extent you are a foodie, those are the only 2 jury trials in my life that I gained weight doing. And I mean that. And that's a credit to you. What a family, man. You've got 2 sons, Erlen and Alec. And I'll tell one story about that. Erlen was playing baseball in high school, and he'd never seen an outdoor game because the Twins played in the Metrodome. And you figured out that that's not right. If he's going to be a good ball player, he ought to see an outdoor baseball game. So you concocted this scheme. You were in St. Louis on business, and you convinced me. Erlen was 15. You convinced me by offering me your brand new Acura to drive Erlen to St. Louis. That's 600 miles. We watched the Cardinals that night. We got in the car, we drove halfway to Chicago, we flopped into a motel, and we drove to Chicago. We caught the Cubs at Wrigley that afternoon. We got back in the car, drove to Milwaukee, went to County Stadium, saw the Brewers, got back in the car and drove home. 40 hours, 3 games, 1,400 miles. Brilliant. I had a great time. So did Erlen. And I learned a lot about parenting just watching you 2 in those 40 hours. Around the office, for all the serious stuff that everybody thinks David does all the time, he was a constant jokester. And one of his favorite moves was to do kind of a fake pratfall, kick his heel and kind of go like this, and sometimes throw a paper up. And everybody's like, "What? You okay? You okay?" And it was your way of making sure we all understood. Don't take yourself so seriously. Leave your ego out of the room. You know, every now and then we're going to trip and fall. It's okay. The other thing you would do is you'd give us the little over the eyebrow thing. You'd be sitting in a conference room in a horrible deposition or with a tough client. Go by the conference room in the window and give us a little of that. It was the same thing. It's like, don't take yourself so seriously. Life's good. You're good. Leave your ego at the door. Most recently, when I learned of your diagnosis, my wife Barb and I came over to visit you, and as we walked into your office, there you were with your boxes of books and your screens and the normal stuff. You were playing dead. You know, you're like this. And we go, what? And then I saw the smile and I heard the laugh. Brilliant. You haven't lost a step. In closing, I asked you how you were doing. And like Erica noted, you told me to go watch Lou Gehrig's speech. And I've done that several times. And for all of you out there watching this, if you want to know how David's doing, find it on YouTube. It's on Google. Watch Lou Gehrig's speech from July 4th, 1939 at Yankee Stadium. And then you'll have an insight into how David's doing. And David, Mary Kay, congratulations on hitting it out of the park. Congratulations on your career, David, your family, your boys, your grandkids. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Cooper. I now have the honor of introducing Eric Janus, President and Dean Emeritus at Mitchell Hamline Law School.
Well, thank you very much, Erica, and thanks to all who've organized this important program. And I am very honored to be able to speak today to help you celebrate, David, your lifetime of achievements. And in particular, to be able to recognize and thank you for your extraordinary contributions to the Lawyers Law School, William Mitchell College of Law. From your student days in evening classes in the 1970s, through over 30 years of adjunct teaching, your vision of how to train our new professional colleagues has been central to the growth and maturation of the school that we love. I was trying to think about when we first met, and I couldn't remember exactly when it was, but certainly by the time I came to Mitchell in 1984, I knew your name and reputation. What I knew by your reputation was the central place you were creating in the legal profession here in Minnesota and nationally. Your writing partnership with my colleague, Roger Haydock, and others, Eric Magnuson, has created a literal library of books that shaped lawyers and law practice across the country. It's not an exaggeration to say that your books have been among the most influential in training lawyers, advancing their professional practice, and a sound estimate, and this comes from Roger, who's definitely a very objective observer of this, is that your books have been used by over half the litigators in the US at one time or another in their careers. That is what you call an impactful and important legacy. When I spoke with a number of our colleagues at Mitchell Hamline, Roger said that the two of you first connected when you were a student in one of the clinics at Mitchell in the 70s. He tells the story of a court appearance that the two of you made on behalf of a clinic client, in which the judge referred to you as the professor and Roger as the student. No doubt because of your professionalism and skill, even as a student, which was showing so brilliantly. Roger recognized your talents. He said that even in law school, you were a better writer than he, and he recruited you to work on his then current project, a book on Minnesota discovery practice. As a student, you contributed a chapter to that book, and that was the beginning of this wonderful partnership with Roger and others that has created such important work for our profession. Everyone I talked to prepare these remarks had their unique perspective and recollections, of course, but central to all of their comments were your high standards. Roger told me that even after working with you for decades, he was still a bit nervous sending you his drafts, anticipating your sharp editor's eye. And as I'll mention in a moment, I felt the same way when I was serving as dean of the law school. In many, many ways, you've contributed to and shaped the law school now known as Mitchell Hamline School of Law. You were a student during the period in the 1970s when the school began a critical transformation. And in my view, you have shaped and personified and nurtured that transformation throughout the years. Recall that the school had been a night law school for its 70+ year history. It was, in the words of Professor Eileen Roberts, another one of your close friends on the faculty, not a very warm and fuzzy place in the 70s, and did not reach for much beyond the basics. After all, the students were working, often full-time jobs, School was an add-on, and there was skepticism that a night law school could grow beyond that bare bones approach. But in the face of those doubts, it was in that period that Roger, Rosalie Wall got the clinical program going. You were a part of that. When Mike Steenson and Marcy Wallace got the law review going, you were a part of that, helping, in Mike's words, to drive the law review forward in its early years. And it was during that period that Roger and John Sonstang and others began to think seriously about how to teach the skills of lawyering. And over the years, you've been a key part of that project as well. Central to all of these developments, and in my opinion, to the core mission of William Mitchell, to the soul of that school, is the insight that law schools ought to be understood as professional training, preparing people to become expert practitioners. And that mission requires the marriage of the practical and the academic. That, David, in my view, is the key insight that you have brought and nurtured in the school and in the profession. William Mitchell had always been a law school for lawyers. You were a key to its moving beyond that, not by rejecting the practical, but by understanding that expert practice can be taught thoughtfully and intentionally, and by combining the highest standards of intellectual rigor with the highest standards of practical skill. You've brought that insight, that mission in your writing and in your teaching. Of all of the adjunct teachers, and we've had thousands who have taught at Mitchell, your tenure is among the longest, the most distinguished, and the most versatile. Very early on, you taught a judicial intern clinic. You developed it. You taught pretrial practice, appellate advocacy, international litigation, federal jurisdiction, and one of the most intense and intellectually engaging courses, recent Supreme Court cases. When you and Roger and Eileen Roberts taught in the school's London program, you took the students to visit Lloyd's of London. When you taught recent Supreme Court decisions, you integrated experiential instruction well before it was the buzzword of legal education. In Eileen's words, you were the adjunct professor from Central Casting. As I mentioned a moment ago, one of the through themes among the folks I spoke with has been your high standards, your somewhat irascible, sardonic bearing. In Roger's words, you're very flexible and caring, but also very demanding. Mike Steenson noted your unusual intelligence, what he called your half smile, like you knew something that he didn't. Peter Knapp said you always had a certain amount of irascibility. And that made me think back on my conversations and interactions with you over the years. Quite honestly, David, I felt like you were kind of keeping an eye on me, especially as I moved into the Dean's suite, to make sure that we at Mitchell were good stewards of the law school that you loved and helped to shape and to prosper. And that stewardship was all about maintaining the strong connection to the profession, the focus on training for an expert practice. Lawyers you felt should be taught by lawyers, and that we should always keep in mind that these were our future colleagues we were training. And with me and others, you sometimes expressed some skepticism, always good-natured, about changes in the law school that you felt might be moving it away from its core mission. For example, as recalled by Peter Knapp, you were not quite sure about moving the start time for evening classes to 4 p.m. rather than 6 p.m. Let's face it, when you attended Mitchell in the 1970s, night law school was sometimes a pejorative term, but you have been persistently and steadfastly proud of your alma mater. Providing practical training in the evening for working students was, in your view, not simply a convenient schedule, but a fundamental choice for training professionals. You've been a great champion of working law students because you understand how central that hybrid of academic and practical is to producing excellence in the profession. As I mentioned, Roger Haydock said he always felt a little nervous sending you his drafts. Well, I always felt that way when I saw you. especially when I was the dean, hoping that you'd be pleased with our stewardship of the legacy that you had had so much of a role in developing and nurturing. That you have approved, for the most part, that we've met your standards is a great honor for me. Mitchell Hamline School of Law is such a contributor to the profession, indeed, contributed to the quality of our civic life in this state because of your vision, your high standards, your teaching, and your attention. On behalf of all of us at Mitchell Hamline School of Law, we thank you for all you've done for the school, for all you've helped us become, and for all you've done for our profession and our community. Yours, David, is a huge legacy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Janus, for those words. I'd like to now introduce Timothy Berg, former president of the American Academy of Appellate Lawyers and director at the Fennemore Craig Law Firm in Arizona.
Good morning. As you may have guessed from that introduction, I know David as a fellow of the American Academy of Appellate Lawyers, as well as a good friend. It's hard to condense down to a few minutes all that David has done for the Academy, but I'm going to try to do that. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, the Academy is a national invitation-only group of appellate lawyers throughout the United States. I like Eric's description of us. We are either the brightest kids in the room or the people who think they're the brightest kids in the room. But in any event, we meet semi-annually, take parts in programs that seek to educate and inform our fellows and advance the practice of appellate law in the United States. The Academy also files comments on proposed rules of procedure and amicus briefs in cases raising issues of appellate law and procedure. Membership in the Academy is a prestigious achievement that is recognized, respected, and coveted. David became a fellow of the Academy in 1993. One of my favorite recollections of David is an early one, which is his participation in a truly excellent program that we had in 2003 about the University of Michigan Law School's affirmative action policy. David and others in the firm had represented a student challenging the law school's policy and took the case to the United States Supreme Court. When the case was over, David and other panelists who'd represented opposing parties in the case came and made a presentation to us about the case and made it come alive. It's really one of the first programs the Academy had where opposing counsel on a major Supreme Court case discussed their strategy in briefing and arguing the case and why they thought the court had come out the way it had. It was incredibly educational, very helpful for anyone who is going to argue a major case or argue in front of the Supreme Court. Of course, David's 28 years in the Academy have not been spent simply as a fellow. He was president of the Academy during 2004-2005. During his tenure, he appointed a committee to study the future of appellate practice in light of the reduction in oral argument in appellate courts, the increasing role of technology, and the trend towards specialization of appellate practice. That committee produced a statement on the functions and future, of appellate lawyers. It continues to be a touchstone today, both inside and outside the Academy. During David's term, a formal strategic plan for the Academy was first developed as a critical roadmap for the fulfillment of its long-term mission. He also guided the Academy to form a group to review American Bar Association rules and proposals on professional conduct, as well as appointing liaisons to other legal groups. David was a proactive president, and the Academy benefited greatly from his leadership. After David stepped down as president, he took what is one of the Academy's most thankless jobs, which is he chaired the meetings committee. This committee has the difficult, if not impossible, task of pleasing all the fellows in the committee, in the Academy, in choosing meeting sites. As any of you who belong to professional groups know, it's not easy to select sites that are attractive to members, easy to get to, in the case of the Academy related to appellate law, without going to the same places over and over again. As with everything else David did in the Academy, he chaired this Academy with skill, diplomacy, and success. He would listen to really outlandish proposals and nod and look at them sagaciously and make sure that we didn't do something silly. He would look at requests to go again and again to the same city and listen to them with patience and make sure that we didn't do that to the point where people stopped being interested in attending Academy meetings. Though impressive, this dry recital of David's kind of formal contributions to the Academy misses one of his most significant contributions. David has been a welcoming presence at the Academy meetings, both to fellows and to their spouses and guests. My wife, Pat, and I have had numerous dinners with David at various Academy meetings. He is the best dinner companion of anyone we know. He not only chooses excellent restaurants and superb wine, as has been noted before, but his stories about his family, his practice, his various writing projects are invariably full of good humor. His pride in Mary Kay and the children, as well as his genuine joy in hearing the accomplishments of others, is clear whenever you talk to him. Academy meetings are always extra special if you get a chance to share a meal and a conversation with David. David's participation has both strengthened the Academy and enriched its fellowship. In doing so, he has contributed meaningfully to the recognition and development of state and national appellate practice. He has also been a close and good friend to many of us in the Academy. We have been deeply enriched by being able to say that we're friends of David Herr.
Thank you so much, Tim. And now, as our last presenter, I'd like to introduce David's wife, Mary Kay Herr, who would like to share some words on her behalf and on David's behalf as well.
Good morning. David is sure that I will not be able to get through this without crying a lot. But I told him I could do it. But I have to read what I've written. Thank you everyone for coming together like this to honor David. I've always known he's a really good lawyer, but I know him best as a really good husband and father and uncle. I've known him to sit at his desk in his study at home. And he didn't call it an office, it was his study. And he would work and write until the wee hours of the morning. He loved his work, he loved writing. He was happy with books all around him and his big computer screen where he could have two documents up at the same time. As much as he loved working in his study, he was at home, and unless he was on the phone, the door was open and he was with us, his family. But what happened when he went to work, when he was with you, was a little more of a mystery. So thank you for these stories of how you have known David as a lawyer and a friend. These stories are treasures. They are gifts, and we thank you. I like this story about David. He once said that if he won the lottery, he would pay someone to hire him on an important appeal, because that's what he loved. I've always loved David's use of language. Well, while I would struggle to find the right words, he always seemed to say it just right. I loved his wit and his use of idioms, and he remembered the lyrics to the funniest songs. ALS is a devastating and cruel disease, and it has robbed David of his voice. It is weak and breathing is difficult, so his words are slow and deliberate. We value this time we have together when we are able to say what we want to each other. And here are a few things he told me that he would like to say to you. Thank you all for your appearance today and for your many vast, probably over-generous recollections. I have no reason to dispute any of the facts, but worry perhaps that they create a misimpression. My life at the bar has hardly been an exercise in self-sacrifice. I got at least as much out of anything I have done as anyone else. Every class I have taught has given me at least as much as my students. It was a profound privilege and honor to have served as reporter for several of the court's rules committees, and I always found it professionally and personally stimulating to serve with so many gifted justices, judges, and attorneys. Every pro bono case I've handled has similarly returned so much to me. Ours is a great profession, and it is an honor to be a member of it. So again, thank you so much for your caring and heartwarming remarks. God bless you all. David.
Thank you so much, Mary Kay, for your words and for sharing David with us for all these years. And thank you for everything that you are doing to care for David. And I want you to know that if you ever need anything, I hope you will call us at Maslon and we will take care of you. I want to thank everyone who was able to join us today. We had over 250 attendees in person, live, I should say, from all over the world, actually. People joining us from Australia, from London, all over the state, who set their alarm clocks to wake up in the middle of the night to be here. We're also recording this event, and so there's going to be many people who are watching this in the future. I want to thank you for taking the time to do that. If you wanted to send David a note, he is checking his email still at his Maslon email address, david.her@maslon.com. And in closing, David, on behalf of all of us, thank you. Thank you for your kindness, your generosity, your friendship, and your mentorship. We hope the journey that you're on is a peaceful one, and we love you. Thank you again to everybody who was able to join us and that took the time to be with us today. Thank you so much.